So just a moment. Okay, no questions. Wow. Okay. I'll just take it that you're contently absorbing it all. So I'm not going to review what we went over last week because that review would just require an entire hour and a half in itself. That was quite a heavy class. Last week, we went through really the structure of the theory of bhava and rasa, which is coming from the Natya Shastra. And we talked about the recipe of art as given in the Natya Shastra. So the recipe, and I say recipe, not feeling I'm the clever one. It's actually Bharani who's the clever one. In the Natya Shastra, he compares the creation of rasa, which is the qualifier of a work of art. He compares it to cooking, and all of those different flavors mixing together are, in our terms, they are the anubhavas, vibhavas, sthai bhavas, vyabhichari bhavas, and sattvika bhavas. So the determinants, the causes, the conditions, and then the sthai bhavas being the permanent bhav or the theme, that is like the thread through the mala, the thread that connects all of the scenes and all of the flavors. And then the variations within the theme. So if it's the theme is love or sringara rasa, then you have different shades, different moments in the love story, like the ecstasy of union, and then the fear and insecurity and separation, and all of the things that go into making a good love story. Just like making a tasty curry, it has to have all these little variations on flavor. And then the sattvika bhava, which are like the physical symptoms that an actor shows when they are steeped in that state of bhava. Okay, so we had one question that was, can we create, okay, so as performers, we create rasa. Bhava is the cause, rasa is the effect. And essentially, we've learned over these lectures that rasa is really the point of creating a work of art. So in our case, particularly in Indian dance, we act, and we have the abhinaya section of dance. We have the nritya, pure dance, and the storytelling components. So when the actor or the dancer comes to the stage, it's their job, their duty, their responsibility. The goal of art is to create rasa. Rasa is what is tasted by the audience or savored by the audience. It's the aesthetic experience, as many aestheticians would describe it. So the question is, we know we create that in performance, but if you're not performing, for example, if you're teaching, do you create rasa and bhava while teaching? Is it possible? Is it the same thing? Is it the same process? And I thought that was a really good question. And it's my own experience that the answer is absolutely. If you don't have bhav, nobody wants to listen to you. They're not going to come to your class. My personal feeling, I love to perform. I love to perform. I love to teach. But it is a much harder performance for me to teach. So my students who train with me months at a time, day after day here at Shakti School of Dance in India, they know some days, you know, I feel terrible. I don't feel like teaching, but it's my job to come into the class and to inspire people to do their best. And so after class, the student will say like, oh, how are you feeling? I'm like, oh, terrible. I feel horrible. oh, really? We had no idea. I said, yeah, it's because I'm trained as an actor. I mean, I'm not going to bring my misery to the classroom and dump it on you. Why would I do that? You're all here to be inspired. So I really feel like the limits of my acting ability, my conjuring of rasa are tested as a teacher. That's just my feeling of being a teacher. And maybe other people have different experiences or different opinions. But that's a very clear experience for me as a teacher. And I think about what it is to study with my teachers. I've studied for the last 2 decades in a very specific way. And that method of learning that I'm absolutely in love with is the Guru Shishya Parampara. So my sister is a university in Oxford University. She's a professor there. She's a university person, academic, and we often get into the discussion of like the academic paradigm as this very well-established method of transmission of knowledge. And I am deeply steeped in the Guru Shishya Parampara, which is another method of transmission, and it's dying out. And it has been a part of every culture in the world, but certainly it's died out in some cultures more than others, but it's still preserved in India. So the Guru Shishya Parampara, what I'm getting at is that my experience of training with my gurus is that I was after a specific result, and that result is this intangible juice, this rasa, that is transmitted through association and through a close relationship. So when I spend time with my gurus, whether it's my dance guru, my spiritual guru, my martial arts gurus, it is about being in proximity to them and absorbing kind of the abstract essence of the teaching, and not so much about the technical skill. Because to acquire a technical skill, it's actually quite easy, but to absorb the juice of a art form is a very subtle thing. And so that's why we acknowledge this close, intimate relationship of Guru Shishya Parampara, of living with the guru, spending time with the guru inside the classroom and outside. So its function is so that an essence is transmitted. So now when I become a teacher, it's very clear to me, I can write out how to do a movement. I can film it. I can email you that. Everything can be done very tangibly, but the essence of the dance is transmitted through bhava. So when I feel the bhava of a student developing, somebody might have the right coordinates in their body when they're doing a movement, but it's when the bhav starts to develop, that essence of a movement, the intention of the movement, imagination inside of the movement, the underlying symbolism is understood by the student. That shows in this magical luster on their body, through their face, through their eyes, and through the bhav that they're transmitting. And that is the result that we're after, at least, you know, in my tradition, in classical Indian dance. And I also feel that way in fusion, that it's not just about hitting the mark with the movement, but it's about exuding bhav, this abstract ambiance through the movement. And that's the result that we're after. So it's my job to transmit that bhava in the classroom, and it creates a whole atmosphere. And certainly as a performer and as a teacher, I realize sometimes I create that bhav and sometimes I miss the mark. You know, every performance isn't successful, but I definitely can recall, you know, at the end of a day, I can feel like, oh yeah, there was this one moment in class where everybody just dropped in and they were into it. And I know that I was creating that bhav and everyone got into it. And then it's like we were all participating in this subtle playing field of rasa. And I know some of you who are tuned in have experienced that with me in the classroom. And so I definitely, to answer the question, yes, as a teacher, you have to transmit bhav. You have to create that ambiance. That is the magic of art. And it happens as we're learning to teach, is also to perform and to transmit. So yes, we can apply that theory to teaching, although the reason the theory was created, the intention behind the theory was in the context of performance. So Bharat Muni is not talking about teaching, he's talking about performing. If everybody could, oh, I can mute everyone, yeah? I'm gonna mute you all. I hear a little shuffling. Okay, and then the other question was in reference to appreciation of a work of art. So the question was, am I not a rasika if I don't appreciate a work of art that other people do? Is there something wrong with me? Have I failed to be a rasika? And the answer is no. Remember, in the beginning, we defined our scope of aesthetics as a subjective realm. And that's the subjective nature of our discussion includes personal preference, includes cultural norms or cultural values. It also, as I said, when defining what a rasika is, the one who savors rasa, I mean, I think of myself as a rasika. I want to appreciate art. Certainly, I've been to performances where I wasn't capable in that moment to appreciate art because whatever reason, I was wrapped up in another thought, I was distracted, or I just wasn't in the right mood. So we can momentarily fail to grasp the depth of a work of art and still be a rasika. I mean, I think ultimately it's a choice. You have to have interest and desire. And we can also fail at appreciating a work of art and come back to that work of art many years later and have the maturity to see the layers that we didn't see before. And I think we've all experienced that in our life. So we also have the right to say, you know what, I just don't like that dancer. There's just something about them, or I just don't like that kind of music. It's not how I want to feel. And we can kind of intellectually appreciate, a work of art and not feel it and not be transformed. And that's because art is subjective, and the experience of rasa is subjective. It's not a failure or damnation. Like you're never gonna get it if you don't appreciate, I don't know, Beethoven or something. It's your preference. So kind of jumping from there, to talk about the subjectivity of a rasika, many aestheticians, and one who mentions this really eloquently is one of our favorites, Ananda Kumaraswamy, who wrote The Dance of Shiva. It is one of the first books I always recommend people to read because they're short essays and very attainable, very succinct. So he talks about the need for imagination to complete a work of art. And this feeds into something I want to talk about later down the line, which is art is a suggestion. And I remember my Kathak guru, I remember the moment she told me that, with a subtle gesture, she said, dance is a suggestion. Indian dance is a suggestion. We don't say it outright, we suggest it. And so this imagination on the part of the rasika is very much an important component to receiving that rasa. And so Kumaraswamy says, it is a little too easy to decide that our own is best. We are most entitled to believe that it is the best for us. This relativity is nowhere better suggested than in the classic saying attributed to Majnun. So for those of you who don't know the story of Layla and Majnun, it's a great work of literature, Persian literature, which is like, I think it predates Romeo and Juliet, but it's like the epic love story, the eternal love story. So when we talk about Majnun, so it's pointed out to him that the world at large is regarded as Layla is far from beautiful. So according to the stories, Layla, his beloved, was not so beautiful. And so the saying goes, to see the beauty of Layla requires the eyes of Majnun. So to see the beauty in her, it's through his eyes. So it is subjective in nature. The greatest love story, we can only appreciate that love of her, that beauty of her, through his eyes. Poems, pictures, dances, and so forth are effective reminders. But this can only mean that they possess that kind of form which reminds us of beauty and awakens in us an aesthetic emotion. So this reminder of beauty, it's like the reminder of rasa. It just, what he's saying here is really, it's very potent in that it requires our imagination. Imagination also depends on our memory, our previous experience. So to be a rasika, all of these things come into play. The capacity of our imagination, the power of our imagination, and the fact that these suggestions in art are simply reminding us of an experience that we've had in the past, or reminding us of something which has lain dormant within us that hasn't yet been awakened. So if beauty awaits discovery everywhere, that is to say that it awaits upon our recollection. So in aesthetic contemplation, as in love and knowledge, we momentarily recover the unity of our being, released from individuality. Kumaraswamy goes on to say, the spectator's appreciation of beauty depends on the effort of his own imagination, just as in the case of children playing with clay elephants. So this is really interesting. He's talking about clay elephants, but whatever it is, it's a symbol. Whatever art presents us is symbolism. And just like in the theory we talked about last week, the theory of the creation of a work of art being threefold and being circular, in that it begins in the imagination or the interior realm of the artist. So it starts within the imagination and the bhava blossoms. The rasa is released, so that transmission is released. And then the rasika enjoys it. It's the full circle of a work of art. It's through symbolism that we transmit. A clay elephant is just a clay elephant, but to a child, it's alive, and there's a story, and there's emotion and excitement involved in that. So art suggests through symbolism, but it's the power of the imagination to complete that story. So an actor on a stage, and particularly in Indian classical dance where we do angika abhinaya. So if I have to portray an angry demon and I have to pull out my sword as I go into battle, that's my arm. It's not a sword. But by the power of my imagination, it has to become a sword. And then you in the audience, it's not a sword. So what is all this excitement and emotion about? But through your imagination, it becomes a sword. And so it's the rasika, the power of imagination to complete that. It's just a suggestion. Like, it's actually just a canvas with colors mushed around on it, but with your imagination, you stitch it together and it becomes a beautiful woman. It becomes a beautiful scene. So it's through the power of the rasika's imagination that we complete the work of art. So Hindu writers say that the capacity to feel beauty, or we should say to taste rasa, cannot be acquired by study. But there is a word of merit gained in a past. The poet is born and not made, but so also is the rasika. If not attained now, it may come when we shall better be prepared. So this is by Kumaraswamy, and this is interesting. It's hinting at a fundamental truth in the Vedic worldview. So it doesn't really make sense if we don't understand this worldview, in that why I brought in Vedanta and this kind of philosophy into a conversation of art. The idea of these latent impressions, these impressions which stay with us and in fact create the samskara, which is carried lifetime after lifetime until we rid ourselves of samskara, the veil that separates us from Brahman. Then we keep going through these cycles of rebirth. So assuming that we believe in that, you hear in India a lot of times in the classical dance world, you see a little girl, like 5 years old, 6 years old, dancing Bharatnatyam, dancing Odissi, dancing and Abhinaya with incredible skill and deep emotion and dexterity, and you just feel this is incredible. How is it even possible that this child can even conceive of just doing one or two mudras? And then immediately someone in the room will say, oh, it's because she was a dancer in her past life. How can a child attain mastery in music? I mean, maybe not mastery, but at least extraordinary skill at a very young age. We see it all the time in India because children are, start in their training very young here. And it's always, said, well, clearly this child has come lifetime after lifetime to do the sadhana of music, to become an artist. So it's this predisposition. And certainly we can all feel like, in my family, as I mentioned, my sister is an academic. I have one sister, so we're two girls. Naturally, everyone in the family compares. We're very close in age. So, I have black hair, she has blonde hair. I wanted pink, she wanted blue. It's like, we're always, compared, and then always had to define that contrast. And I'm the artist and she's the intellectual. And, you kind of, as I don't know about some of you artists out there, but, being the one artist born in a professional academic family, you kind of feel like, where did this come from? Because I definitely didn't learn it from my parents. So it's because of a past life momentum, is how it's explained in this Vedic perspective, is that we carry that potentiality from a past experience. We carry that over, like some are spiritually inclined and some are not. So in the spiritual context, in spiritual study, in yoga, it's said that we carry that work over. If someone is inclined to violence, it's because something they're carrying from a past momentum. If someone is inclined to spiritual study or art or higher level science, it's because of a past momentum. So it's interesting how we look at what it is to be a rasika. So certainly if you work hard at being a rasika in this lifetime, if we follow that concept forward, then you will be better prepared for being a rasika in a subsequent life. So you hear dancers in India often say, like, let me just come lifetime after lifetime to do this work so I may finally understand this art, because it's not possible to attain it all in one life. It's such a vast field of study. So today we are going to go through a couple excerpts from the Upanishads, just reviving that view of rasa being that aesthetics is a spiritual experience by its very nature, because it's happening in a very subtle realm of our awareness. And then we'll talk about beauty and the perception of beauty. And hopefully we'll still have time to lead us into the pressing subject of sringara rasa, of the romantic rasa. So if we look at rasa, once again, I mentioned it before in previous lectures, if we look at rasa as being this experience of Brahman, if we look at rasa as defined in the earliest text, earliest Sanskrit texts, even predating the Natya Shastra, so obviously giving way to the concepts presented in the Natya Shastra, but really defining this worldview, this Vedic worldview, we find rasa mentioned in the Vedas and then in the Upanishads. Upanishads being the, how do I say it, like the essence of the Vedas, or the final conclusions of what is presented in the Vedas. So rasa is considered the qualifier of a work of art. And rasa is also considered as being the intrinsic pleasure or making up of a mindset which transforms itself into a pure state of pleasure. Pleasure in this case being bliss or ananda. Ananda, which many of us have heard the Sanskrit word meaning bliss, is the ultimate aim of spiritual pursuits, which the yogis attain through sadhana. Sadhana being, you should read my article on sadhana if you don't know what it means, it's on my website. Sadhana being a concentrated effort and a work towards a spiritual aim. So rasa is the innermost experience closely akin to this. Ananda, or bliss, is complete and continuous, is a complete and continuous transformation and flows like a continuous stream of oil or honey. So this is a translation of a Sanskrit verse. You often hear this comparison in other yogic works. I've heard it, I can't remember if it's in Yoga Sutras, but certainly in many, many texts on yoga, on meditation, on spiritual thought, this continuous stream of oil or honey. So like when you pour oil or you pour honey, it's one continuous stream. I'm not talking about when it goes drop, drop, drop. The goal is to attain that continuous flowing stream, which is the goal of meditation. So when we sit in meditation, it's like, okay, I'm going to meditate. Okay, I'm meditating, Om, Om, Om. Then thinking about what's for breakfast, then coming back to the meditation. No, the goal of the meditation is that we enter one continuous stream, like when we pour oil. So ananda or bliss is this continuous stream when we immerse in bliss. So the central aim in aesthetics or art is rasa. Rasa is the direct source of ananda or bliss, which is the ultimate goal of all artistic creation and certainly the very essence of beauty itself. This is a quote from, again, translated from Upanishads. So Saitya Darpana, a text on rasa, defines rasa as pure, indivisible, self-manifested, compounded equally of joy and consciousness, free of admixture with any other perception, the very twin brother of the mystic experience. And the very life of it is super sensuous, beyond, finally beyond the senses. So rasa is said to be an experience of divine identity. And in his commentary on Upanishads, Shankara asserts rasa here is used to mean such bliss as innate in oneself and manifests itself even in the absence of external aids to happiness. This emphasis is that bliss is non-material. So bliss being non-material or subjective. So if we enjoy a work of art, finally, if we want to analyze it, because that's what we do in aesthetics, if we want to distill something down, okay, I like this painting. What is it about it? Is it this section? Is it this color? Is it? No, it's the overall effect which creates the rasa. Finally, we will always distill it back down to it is the rasa that is the essence of that work of art, that is that beauty. It's non-material and it is subjective. So the Upanishad refers to rasa as being the essence of all things. This is really how it is defined in the Upanishads. Upanishad is not a text on art. It is a text on the essence of the Vedas, the essence of spiritual knowledge. So rasa is a word used to express the essence of all thing, which is what, in the Vedic perspective, is the supreme reality or Brahman. So Taittiriya Upanishads mention, having tasted rasa, the soul is full of bliss. And really these quotes can go on and on. I have several verses from the Upanishads, but once and again, it keeps reinforcing that this experience of rasa is an immaterial experience. It's a subtle experience. It's a saturation of something like bliss, entering into that stream of bliss. So finally, we can deduce all of these quotes, all of these references. We can just kind of summarize all of that in something that Kumaraswamy talks about in his book, which is that religion, or we should say spirituality, religion and art are thus names for one and the same experience, an intuition of reality and of identity. And I would say true identity rather than the ahamkara or the ego identity, but an experience of the true identity. So when we encounter the word rasa in Indian aesthetic theory, something I feel like I should say, because I'm not quite sure if I identified this, usually in Western art, or even just I feel like in general conversations about art, we use the word in English, we use the word beauty to express like the essence, the triumph of a work of art. So whether it's a grotesque painting, you know, expressing the horrors of war and the traumas of war, we can say, wow, that it's so beautiful. It's so real, right? We're trying to find a word to express what is the success of that work of art. What we might say as beauty, we can interchange in the Indian aesthetic theory as rasa, the qualifier of the work of art. So naturally, a question of aesthetics is what is beauty? So if we are understanding beauty and rasa, we find that in the Indian aesthetic context, it's kind of generally believed that the idea of beauty is defined and summarized in this three-part statement. Many of you have heard me say this, and somehow it becomes our motto at Shakti School of Dance, or in my work: Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. A beautiful verse composed of three parts defines for the Indian aesthetic theory what is beauty. Beauty is satyam, which is truth. Shivam. Shiva is the Lord, but it's understood that Shiva is Param Brahman, is the eternal ever-presence, that eternal ever-present divine, which we have been mostly referring to as Brahman, because I think it's helpful to speak more in the spiritual essence terms rather than in the religious terms, so that it's maybe a little bit easier to relate to. But Shivam representing that Brahman, that ultimate reality that we've been referring to from the Upanishads. So the divine. And Sundaram, Sundara is beautiful. So that which is beautiful is eternally true, is how I would translate this verse. What we finally distill down to beauty, to meaning beauty, is that which is eternal, which is truth. So this verse is a kind of a motto in Indian aesthetic theory, and if we unravel it, we have to unravel it referring back to these verses from Upanishads and from various texts which refer to rasa. So something beautiful that Kumaraswamy often mentions in his writings is that beauty, then, we're starting to shift to using the word beauty. So if we talk about beauty, what is beauty? Beauty, then, is freedom from thought. So he's saying beauty is freedom from thought. He's talking about here, pure form means form not clogged with unesthetic matters, such as associations. This is one of my favorite sentences that I've ever read. I'm going to Okay. Can you hear me? That was just a test. Okay. And the thunder is rolling. Okay. So you got my quote about beauty there, right? So beauty is that which is not clogged with unesthetic matter. Oh, repeat, please. Okay. I'm not sure from where I have to repeat, but I was talking about, I'll just repeat the verses or the lines from Kumaraswamy. Beauty, then, is a freedom from thought. Beauty is freedom from thought. So what is he talking about? Beauty is, we know bhava is a state of being before thought enters the mind. And we recognize this concept from the second verse of Yoga Sutras by Patanjali as Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is completely stopping the fluctuations of the mind being the turbulent thought waves, such as associations, right? So he's saying that this unesthetic matter is the chatter of the mind, is our associations, is our self-identity, right? It's the ego. So we remember the process of going to the stage and applying this concept of bhava and rasa is that As the actor, I go to the stage. But if I'm thinking about how I look as I'm portraying this character, I'm not in the character. So the bhava is not unfolding. The rasa is not transmitted. I'm stuck in that unesthetic matter, which is association. And here comes the rain. Ah! Give me a second. I'm going to move downstairs. It's coming. 1 minute. Okay. Are you here with me? Woohoo! Okay. This is a heat storm. It's so hot. We're so excited to have a little sprinkle. So it's getting cozy here. Okay, so moving on. Again, I'm quoting Kumaraswamy. This is a great one. He says, precisely as love is the reality experienced by the lover, truth is the reality experienced by the philosopher, so beauty is experienced by the artist. And these are the three phases of the absolute. Again, he's referring to Satyam Shivam Sundaram. But it is only through the objective work of art that the artist is able to communicate his experience. For this purpose, any theme proper to himself will serve, since the absolute is manifested equally in the little and the great, the animate and inanimate, the good and the evil. We have seen that the world of beauty, like the absolute, cannot be known objectively. So, okay, so we're getting into the idea that rasa is beauty and it is something which must be revealed. He's talking about, again, Kumaraswamy is talking about how many works of art have aimed at the production of aesthetic emotion. That is to say, they were intended to be beautiful, but failed of their purpose. So we have all experienced a failed work of art. Hopefully we haven't made too many failed works of art, but I have to say that I'm definitely guilty of that. It's part of the learning process. But what would be a failed work of art? It's like when we look at what he was just saying, something which is clogged with unesthetic matter. What is the unesthetic matter? It's the associations, it's the rambling of the mind, of the ego. It's like when you go to a performance, I mean, in the world of dance, I think the most obvious and common experience that we have with possibly a failed work of art is when you go to a performance and like the dancer is so full of herself and so proud, and you just feel like, ugh, ooh, it just leaves not a nice taste in your mouth. You just feel like almost as if energy is being taken from you instead of given to you. You feel a contraction instead of an expansion. And like I sometimes notice as a dancer this very physical experience that happens to me when I watch dance. So I don't notice it particularly happens to me when I look at a painting or watch a movie. But when a dancer is there, I often I'll be sitting up extra tall and kind of, almost like my body is imitating what's happening on the stage, or the feeling like the transmission is affecting my body because I relate so much to dance. And I've often noticed when I'm watching a performance that that I would say perhaps did not hit the target of creating a rasa or something worth savoring, I feel my body kind of contracted and kind of leaning back in my chair and kind of like my brow a little tense or some physical reaction to that. And so I really noticed that contractive experience when I would say as a rasika that work of art failed at creating rasa. I'm not saying my opinion matters. I'm just saying it's my opinion. I'm just saying it's my experience. Again, to be a rasika, everyone is entitled to their own preferences. But we all have them. That is the truth. We all have that experience of being a rasika. So I also know what it's like to create a failed work of art. Unfortunately, when I maybe haven't quite hit the mark I was looking for in my dance performance, again, I feel for whatever reason I failed. Maybe I wasn't properly prepared. Like, certainly I can remember going to the stage and really not being ready to present a piece on stage, but doing it anyway. Then what happens? I'm in my head and I'm not in the dance. What's happening? A contraction. It's like, it's not that full trust, that full opening up of the body. So I recognize that on both ends of this contractive nature. Whereas we're talking about these grand ideas of creating rasa, which is like the experience of Brahman, realizing the absolute, attaining the ultimate goal of life. I mean, it's pretty lofty, a pretty lofty goal we have here. But certainly that, to me, represents an ultimate expansion, like a removing of the veil of illusion and a realization of truth, of knowing that we are ever-present divine energy. It's a very expansive concept that we're aiming for. So it's just an interesting observation there. So we've already seen, however, that the mere intention to create beauty is not sufficient. There must be an object of devotion. Without a point of departure, there can be no flight and no attainment. So according to Bhagavad Gita, it's also saying one does not attain perfection by mere renunciation. So there has to be this point of departure. What is this point of departure? I love this. I love this idea of the departure. The point of departure, we have to have the structure of the technique. It's basically the threefold cycle of the creation of a work of art. So when we set the intention to go to the stage and to unfold the bhav of our character, or whatever the theme is we're trying to portray, it doesn't have to be a specific storyline, because also in nritta, or in pure dance, purely ornamental dance, we are creating rasa. So, but the idea of a point of departure, it's a place where you dissolve, where the limited self identity dissolves and the bhava takes over. Okay, so this point of departure, we could also say, if I was teaching a yoga theory class, I would say the point of meditation is our point of departure, right? Whatever that point is, finally that becomes irrelevant, because we overcome that, we transcend that. So in Vinyasa Krama Yoga, in our yoga practice that I've been sharing, and I just released an article about it yesterday or day before, the point of departure is the breath. But the point is, we must depart from our limited self, from this limited point, into an expanse, which is rasa. So we should not discover a means of distinguishing forms that are beautiful from forms that are ugly. Beauty can never be thus measured, for it does not exist apart from the artist himself and the rasika who enters into this experience. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The beauty does not exist apart from the artist himself or the rasika entering into the work of art, which is that very common phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So the vision of beauty is spontaneous, in just the same sense as the inward light of the lover or the bhakta. It is a state of grace that cannot be achieved by deliberate effort, though perhaps we can remove hindrances to its manifestation. For there are many witnesses that the secret of all art is to be found in self-forgetfulness. And we know that this state of grace is not achieved in the pursuit of pleasure. The hedonists have their reward, but they are in bondage to loveliness, while the artist is free in beauty. This is such a beautiful, beautiful quote. So the state of grace, it's like this departure requires grace. And I don't know about you, but when I think about those moments when I have even just momentarily transcended my limited self in the experience of art, I mean, that's something, it sounds very spiritual, but it's not that unusual. We all, I mean, all of you are rasikas, otherwise you wouldn't be here. We all are art lovers. We all love to listen to music. How often have you listened to a piece of music and just dissolved into it, just evaporated into it, just finally were able to throw off the shackles of the suffering that life is? I mean, that is what we call pleasure. That's why we enjoy art, because finally we don't go into art to feel, more stressed and more confused about ourselves and more, I mean, at least not in the Indian context. Art must uplift society. It must help us to transcend. So maybe in other contemporary art paradigms, which is not the philosophy that we're talking about, art creates, all of these torturous conditions. But according to Indian art aesthetic theory, we should have a transcendental experience. We should enter into this state of grace where we are finally free from the shackles of the mind, even just for a moment, just dissolving into a beautiful dance, just merging into a beautiful painting, just breathing an exhale after a beautiful poem. It's that momentary state of grace that is given to us, that we experience this bit of transcendence. So this verse is saying that it is a spontaneous experience, and it is given through grace. We cannot actually control this experience. Otherwise, I would be, I don't know about you, but I would be in this experience all day long. Just like keep the on button on. I would like to be transcendent all day long, but it doesn't work that way. It's through grace. It's just given by grace. So it's not based on our deliberate effort, like the idea of the rasika sometimes missing out on the rasa. However, we can't directly control it, but we can learn to remove its hindrance. What hinders this experience? So what hinders this experience? What holds us back from these experiences? Unesthetic matter, which is the chatter of the mind, or the inability to concentrate and to merge into the subtle state of bhava and rasa. So in this case, this is why he's saying the hedonists have their reward. Hedonist is one who is like addicted to pleasure. So hedonism is different than being an artist. He's saying the artist is free in beauty, but a hedonist is one who is bound to that, who is addicted to pleasure. Someone who is addicted to pleasure, enslaved by this addictive tendency, which, if any of you study yoga, we know that it's a human condition. Unfortunately, we all have it to some degree or another, these addictions which hold us back to transcendental states of awareness. So it's an inborn, I don't want to say a flaw, it's a journey that we have to overcome it, this hedonism. But it's quite different to be a hedonist and someone who is addicted to sensuous pleasures, and to be an artist who is free in that beauty. Because what is beauty? Beauty is rasa. Beauty is the state of departure, is that state of departure, which is rasa. So there are no degrees of beauty. The most complex and the simplest expression remind us one and the same thing. So this is also in reference to primitive art or classical art, folk dance or classical dance, all one and the same. Any experience or contact to this beauty, similarly experiencing karuna rasa, tragedy, and experiencing hasya, the comic, both can help us to attain this state of transcendence, of complete saturation of the rasa. Creative art is art that reveals beauty where we should have otherwise overlooked it. I love this one. Because otherwise overlooked it, otherwise paid no attention. This is the way that we surface out beauty. And really the role of the artist is to remind, in the Indian context here, it's also suggestive that there is a duty, a dharma, a responsibility of the artist. This artist plays a role in society. And the ancient Greeks also talked about this. And one thing that I love and appreciate about the aestheticians of ancient Greece is this role of the artist in society to bring attention to areas which would otherwise be overlooked. And in the Indian context, it's to bring our attention back to the realm of the spirit. So it is said that beauty is a state. And this is the name of one of the chapters in Kumaraswami's book of The Dance of Shiva, that beauty is a state. Beauty is the experience of rasa. And I love this statement, beauty is a state, because beauty often, and I think many of you have been in theory classes with me where I've asked the question, what is beauty to you? What is beauty to you? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of beauty? And someone will say, oh, a piece of music, the look in my daughter's eyes when she looks at me. Oh, it's nature, it's a full moon, it's many things to many people. But when we get into the argument of philosophy, the debate in philosophy, and try to distill down but what is it inside of the full moon? What is it inside your daughter's eyes? What is it? It is a state. It is this subjective realm. So this state, again, an expanse, right? So beauty is a state. And beauty, this idea that beauty is a state is going to lead us into our conversation of sringara rasa, the romantic, because the romantic is intertwined absolutely with the idea of beauty. So as we go into this discussion of sringara rasa, I want to point out that beauty, I mean, maybe it's just obvious to point this out, but maybe it's not. Beauty is not pretty. Beauty, when I say beauty, we're not referring to art which emphasizes passing feelings or personal emotions, such as she is pretty and she is not. It is, as Kumaraswamy would say, meeting with heaven again. It confuses time and eternity, loveliness and beauty, partiality and love. So beauty is a state which is delightful or disgusting, exalted or lowly, cruelly or kindly, obscure or refined. There is no subject that cannot evoke rasa in man, and rasa, in fact, is beauty. So we do not mean the same thing when we speak of the beauty of a girl and the beauty of a poem. He's saying we ought not to forget that he who plays the villain in a piece may be a greater artist than he who plays the hero. For beauty does not arise from the subject of a work of art, but from the necessity that has been felt in representing the subject. I like that, the necessity of representing the subject. It's basically, to me, what that means is the sincerity on the part of the artist, that necessity in conveying that. Certainly, as an artist myself, I feel, those are the successful performances when you are so fully invested in what you are portraying that you feel an urgency even in creating this work of art. I need to tell people this. I need them to experience this. It's so urgent. It's so important. There's such a necessity. So beauty leading us into sringara rasa. So sringara, I hope you were all here last week when we broke down the Navarasa. And I'm not going to review that. Eventually, we are going to release this series of lectures as a packet, as a series that you can download and review time after time, because there's so much to contemplate in all of these lectures. You are not supposed to retain, understand, and transcend every statement that is presented to you. That is not the goal, nor is it even possible. These theory classes are an experience in bhava and rasa. Okay, so again, as a teacher, do we create a rasa? Do we work with bhava and rasa? Absolutely. So in these traditional Gurukul systems of learning, in the traditional Vedic systems of learning, we don't take notes. Yeah, in dance class, in yoga philosophy class, we're not sitting there writing down information, because it's about absorbing that atmosphere and dwelling in that atmosphere. Only then can the words start to sink down deep. So these theory classes are meant to be listened to again and again and again. And as you mature as a person, as you mature as an artist, as an esthetician, as a philosopher, so does the meaning of these words. I've been reading some of these verses. I know to some of you for over 10 years. I can see a few faces. You've heard me say this. And I've been saying these verses every time I come back to these concepts. Every time something new unfolds, some new connection, because it's a spiraling logic. It's a web of understanding. It is a realm which we inhabit. And so please revisit these lectures. We will release them all as a package. So I'm moving on to Sringara Rasa just to introduce it today. Sringara Rasa, we know, is the Sthai Bhav, so Rati Bhav and Sringara Rasa. Rati Bhava creates Sringara Rasa. Remember, Bhava and Rasa are one and the same. It is a cause and effect relationship, but they are one and the same. Okay, just like the tree exists within the seed and the tree produces the seed, it's all interconnected. So Sringara Rasa, Rati Bhava. Sringara Rasa. So it is said that there is no life without Sringara Rasa. And I like to start with this. There is no life, there is no creation without Sringara Rasa. Certainly, we all had a mother and father. Certainly, we know how creation takes place. We know at a microcosm, at a macrocosm, this is the nature of creation. Creation comes from Sringara Rasa. And it is believed that this rasa brings all other rasas into being. So it is considered specifically by Vaishnavas, by the extensive aesthetic philosophy, which becomes a spiritual philosophy by traditions like the Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition, established really through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this Vaishnav philosophy around Krishna, around Lord Krishna being the central theme, Sringara Rasa is considered the highest rasa because Bhakti Rasa arises from Sringara. So what is Bhakti? Bhakti means devotion. Bhakti is devotion. So I mentioned before that another viewpoint comes from Abhinavagupta, one theory within our enormous scope of Indian aesthetic theories, which have been elaborated on for thousands of years. There is one great aesthetician and one great body of work and elaboration on the theory of Bhava and Rasa of Abhinavagupta, who was a Kashmir Shaivite philosopher who talked about Shanta Rasa. He added the ninth rasa. That's where we talked about him last week. He added the ninth rasa being Shanta, the peaceful rasa. And so from his perspective, that is the preliminary rasa, which all others are based on. But specifically in a Vaishnav perspective, all other rasa comes from Sringara Rasa because Bhakti comes from Sringara Rasa. So when we talk about rasa, we know that it has this kind of two-part perspective, which is the rasa as seen on oneself and as perceived by others. So for example, in Karuna Rasa, you have the pathetic character which causes you to feel sorry for them, and then you have the empathetic character who is, I gave the example of Jesus and Mother Mary. So both are Karuna Rasa. One is looking, at her son, the Son of God on the cross, and the other is the Son who, so it both are drawing out Karuna Rasa. But it's like, you see how that's a different perspective, but we still arrive at the same rasa. Similarly, there is a two-part scenario in love. There is the lover and the beloved. Love doesn't work any other way. Just like creation doesn't work any other way. It is a principle. This is what we love as philosophers. We like to boil things down to an irrefutable truth. You cannot argue that creation does not require two parts, masculine and feminine. You cannot prove otherwise. That is a principle down to a molecular understanding, right? So similarly, love requires two parts, the lover and the beloved. So according to Natya Shastra, it is said in the Natya Shastra, last week I read a little bit from the Natya Shastra on, I believe it was chapter 6 I was reading to you, which talks about the theory of Bhava and Rasa, and I was reading about Sringara. So in this section it says Sringara has two parts. It's called Sambhoga and Vipralabha. Sambhoga and Vipralamda. So this is love in union and love in separation.
You heard me whining last week about being separated from my beloved. So you can just imagine why this is the theme on my mind. And so, funnily enough, my beloved snuck into the class, and he was actually in class, and he heard me talking about him the whole last class. So the lovers in separation, a timeless theme, and something that we've all experienced in love. So last week, all I could think about was the experience of love and separation. But the good news is there might be a bright future for the lovers uniting, because I think I got a flight to join my beloved, my husband, in Italy on Tuesday. So everybody just say a prayer for me that they don't cancel this flight. It's you know what's going on right now. So the lovers might unite, and then the theme of the class will totally change. But in the meantime, love and separation. Okay, so Sringara Rasa, as we outlined last week in the process of cooking a curry, the process of cooking up a work of art, there must be several ingredients, right? When you cook, you put a little bit of salt, little bit of spicy, little bit of sweet, little bit of pungent, little bit of sour. There's very distinct range that you go for to create a masterpiece, to create a delicious curry. And similarly, Bharat Muni is talking about using that logic in creating a work of art. So the process of creating Sringara Rasa, a successful dish of Sringara Rasa, a successful work of art in Sringara Rasa, according to the Natya Shastra, he mentioned vibhava. What are vibhava? Determinants. So I mentioned this last week. I'll just review it. What is the cause of the bhava? Some of the causes Bharat Muni mentions: springtime, flowers, moonlight, jewelry. That's probably my favorite one. I'm just so thrilled that he mentions jewelry as being a cause of love. Jewelry, fine clothes, and so on. So he mentioned these as some of the bhibhava. So when we're creating a work of art, when a director decides how to set the scene, when staging a play, things like the lovers in the moonlight and the heroine wearing beautiful adornments in a sense of readiness. So these would enhance the cause of Sringara Rasa. Bharat Muni mentions next the consequence or the reactions of the bhava include a particular body language, a graceful body language, such as a smiling face, such as motions of the eyebrows and sweet words. Okay, so these would be the reaction, but also they're certainly enhancing the flavor. So if a woman is adorned in fine clothes and jewelry and you see her eyebrows twitching, you know it's coming. Okay, so then we arrive at the sthai bhava. Sthai bhava, what is sthai bhava? Sthai means permanent or like repetitive, firmly fixed. Theme. So what is the overarching theme? It is Rati Bhava and Sringara Rasa. Then Bharat Muni mentions Vyabhichari Bhavs, also known as Sanchari Bhavs. Sanchari means elaboration. And he mentions 33. There's a lot. So these are like the variations within the dominant theme, within the permanent theme or the sthai bhav. So transient emotions that could enhance a love story. How about fear, languor, jealousy, yearning, dreaming? Okay, so he mentions 33. He mentions that almost all, except for disgust, are appropriate variations in Sringara Rasa. If you look at his suggested application of the Vyabhichari or Sanchari Bhava for example, the comic, he only mentions a few, but all variations are appropriate within Sringara Rasa. Then the last category, he talks about involuntary emotions or sattvika bhava. I like to think of it as the physical symptoms. We say there's a beautiful Sanskrit word for this. It's called lakshana. Lakshana are like physical symptoms. So these include fainting, tears, dryness of mouth, trembling, horripilation, the hairs standing on end. So all of these are appropriate, Bharat Muni mentions, all are appropriate to give variety and to elaborate the experience of Sringara Rasa. So types of Sringara Rasa, types of Rati Bhava. We have different types that are mentioned through the traditional texts and also through a traditional knowledge that is passed on through this Guru Shisha Parampara. So when we start getting into the study of Bhava and Rasa, we have a defined theory written in the Natya Shastra. We can pick it up, we can read it, we can analyze it, we can discuss it. But the reality of studying this is that it's not an objective study, right? I'm giving you concrete words to help you understand these concepts. But the only way for you to understand, the only way for me to teach and transmit the teachings of Bhava and Rasa is to, first of all, give you the experience into the Rasa, and second of all, to give you my experiences, to elaborate through discussion again and again and again through various viewpoints. So this is Guru Shisha Parampara. This is the lived tradition. This is the validity of a lifetime of experience. So when I learn about Rasa and Bhava from my gurus, they're speaking from experience. We listened to, just the other day, I'll share it on my Facebook page. Just yesterday, I was listening to a talk by a wonderful Bharatanatyam master who I really respect for her abhinaya, for her ability to convey, not only to convey as a performer, Bhava and Rasa, but also to articulate the theories so cute, so sweetly in her discourse. She's just adorable. Her name is Brega Beshal, and she is a very senior dancer, a guru who teaches at Kalakshetra, who's considered a master of Abhinaya. And she was giving a talk about her experience of Sringara Rasa in relationship to the Gita Govind. And hearing her talk about it, we received that transmission of her talking about her experience. Yeah. So we learn through text, through the Sanskrit texts, which are preserved, such as Natya Shastra, Abhinaya Darpana, etc. And we also learn from the parampara, the tradition, the lineage, the experience of our gurus. So some of the gurus say there's different types of love. And it is believed that we have, which is usually considered a lower form of love, Vatsalya, which is the love between mother and child. And then we have Sringara, which is a love specifically between a man and a woman. And then we have Bhakti. Bhakti is devotion. So it is between individual and the absolute. So obviously kind of rising in its kind of in a hierarchy of Sringara. So I will end this soon because I want to keep you for next week, and I also had the aim to keep this class at an hour and a half, knowing that we were just going to get into it, but we have a lot more to go. So I wanted to read to you from a book. So we cannot talk about sringara rasa without talking about, guess who? Krishna and Radha. We cannot. It's impossible. There's no way to define love without talking about Radha and Krishna. It's impossible, especially in Indian aesthetic theory. We mentioned Layla and Majnun. We have to mention Radha and Krishna. So I'm reading from this beautiful book about the Ras Leela. It's called Aesthetic Vedanta. And the author is saying, at this point, one must ask, can one relish beauty without form? Image and form are emblems of beauty. The canvas and the brush, the words and their order, make accessible the beauty of art and literature. Beauty itself is abstract, yet it requires form for its expression. If beauty is truth, it is as alive as truth is. And in order to express itself, it requires form. From within the Hindu pantheon and beyond it, if we are to search within all cultures and their myths, it would be hard to find a better candidate for the form of the ultimate beauty other than himself, Krishna. So I'll just carry on. So basically, he's saying, I mentioned it before, we need that point of departure. It is the two-part paradox of the lover and the beloved. Love cannot exist without having this form, which is in fact a two-part form. So how can one relish beauty without form? So this is also the Vaishnav's argument against Advaita Vedanta. So we are entering into a realm, just to confuse you even further. Hopefully it doesn't confuse you. You have to understand, in Indian philosophy, in Vedic philosophy, we have many branches, but all coming from the same root. The root is the Vedic perspective. So we are entering into a dualistic version of Vedanta, which certainly the Gaudiya Vaishnavas follow, which is a dual Vedanta, believing in duality, whereas Advaita Vedanta is the non-dual Vedanta, that Brahman is one. So what these dualistic Vedantins are saying is that the absolute is actually in two parts, the lover and the beloved, which also is the perspective that Sufis take, right? The lover and the beloved. So Krishna is rasa, aesthetic experience. He is rasika, the greatest connoisseur of the aesthetic experience. Radha is the outpouring of this internal unity of rasa and rasika. The union of Radha and Krishna has been compared to the union of iron rod and fire. In such a union, the iron remains iron and the fire remains fire, yet the two become one. In the eternal function of Leela, or divine play, Krishna fully tastes himself through his primal energy, Radha. Radha gives life to Krishna as energy brings the energetic source to life. As sugarcane cannot taste itself, similarly, the tasting of the absolute, or rasa, necessitates such a dynamic, non-dual absolute. The effect of the absolute tasting itself through its essential shaktis is the creation of the phenomenal world and all souls' apparent relationship with it. When the absolute, or Krishna, relates with the phenomenal world, this act of grace attracts all souls to unite with him, entering his divine play and experiencing rasa beyond the confines of the phenomenal world. So this is stating really the fundamentals of the philosophy here for the Vaishnavas, and the understanding of a very important principle of Krishna. It's actually one of his names. He is known as the Rasa Raja. Rasa Raja. Raja means king. So he is the king. He is the very source of rasa. He is rasa. So it is that duality of the rasa and the rasika. Remember, it's what qualifies a work of art. So again, it's like that full circle of the absolute, the sugar cane, the sweetness of the sugar cane not being able to taste itself. So in the ethos of Radha and Krishna, very, very important for you to understand for the next part of this lecture, because we go into thin ice if we take with us too much of an outside perspective. I want us to have an inside perspective in this. If we understand the sugarcane tasting of its own sweetness, if Krishna is rasa, he manifests the rasika from himself. In the ethos, Krishna manifests out of his heart, out of his very essence manifests Radha, who is the iron rod in the fire. She is in the fire, she is the fire, yet somehow she is separate. But they are one and the same. So in an ultimate testament to love and union, I want to read to you a poem, and then I'm gonna say goodbye because it's time to end. Okay, so I stumbled across this poem, so simple and so profound. It actually made me cry when I heard this recently. Okay, so this is Radha speaking to Krishna. She says, "You love me and I love you," we tell each other. "You are my life and I am yours," we prattle. "You belong to me and I to you. It's just not right, Radha," Krishna is saying. "It's just not right, Radha. You should never use you and I when we talk." So sweet. You should never use you and I. So this is the ethos. This is the idea of sringara rasa in the context of Krishna, because we are going on a journey to another galaxy, to a completely another dimension of higher states of sringara rasa. How high can love go? So I'm going to start next week's discourse by mentioning, even linguistically, I remember when I was studying Hindi, not that I'm a great master of Hindi, but I just found this so interesting. When studying Hindi, my teacher explained there are 5 words to describe love in this language, and they graduate. So and I remember feeling like, oh, it's too bad I was born with English, because we only have 1 word to describe love. No, in Hindi, this just gives you an insight, okay, into where this language builds out of such an ancient culture that really focused on Sringara Rasa, really focused on love. There are 5
5 hierarchical terms to the word love. So we'll start by defining those and talking about the stages of love for the Vaishnav. There are stages, 6 stages to love. So we're not just talking about pretty things and passing romance. We're talking about evolutions inside of the Sringara Rasa, which is a very beautiful way for us to lead into a discussion to understanding Indian classical dance. Because if I could summarize Odissi if I could summarize Odissi in the context of Bhava and Rasa, I would choose 2 rasas to define our dance movement. Movement using the terms of Bhava and Rasa. I would choose Vira Rasa, because Vira is the heroic, the strong, the noble, the worthy, the honorable, the truthful. And that rasa certainly shows in our presentation of classical Indian dance. And then absolutely, I would say actually the topmost one is Sringara Rasa. Why Odissi has eyebrow movements, eye movements, why we smile like we know a secret, why is the torso moving, why did the British outlaw temple dancing because they thought it was, because the dance made them blush. Why the sensuality in the dance? Because Sringara Rasa. But we cannot enter the world of Sringara Rasa from a mundane level. We have to understand that there's a graduation to its understanding. And so that's what we'll get into next week. And if you have specific questions, I think email is the best way, and I can try to relate to those or mention those next week. Hopefully, I will be broadcasting live and in person with my Krishna. So let's see. But this is too good of a conversation to end here. So we will definitely continue next week. And thank you to all your enthusiasm and your response. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Please post, please share the possibility of joining these lectures, the links and things with friends. We're just casting the net and inviting Rasikas around the world to tune in and just learn and discover new depths and new possibilities in art. So sending you all lots of love. Ram Ram.